Okay, so today we're going to go through brief introduction about me, and then we'll talk about overview of analytics field. So most likely this area is going to cover a lot of the questions you folks have in mind. Then we'll also talk about the courses that's offered, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end. But I also have been doing this for a while, so I also have some frequently asked question already written down, so we can go through that as well. That being said, very brief about me. So I'm Anwar Hussain. As for education background, I went to UW for my MBA and USC for my master's in computer science. As for work, I work for a company named Funko, located in Everett, and this is the kind of figurines we make. And I lead the analytics team there, and also the role of architect as well. Apart from that, I've been teaching analytics with Skillspire for almost 3 years, right, Yasmin? So,
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
all right. So now I'm sure like you guys are here. You have heard about the analytics and the exciting age and how all the companies are using it and how there are a lot of jobs. So I'm just gonna give a basic, statistics about that. So some of that might be a couple of years older, but even the new data would be very similar. So it was dubbed as the number one job in US, and in terms of work and life balance, data scientist, for example, is in the top of the list. Also very hard to fill the jobs. That's why you also see data science ranks pretty high. And there are a lot of shortages actually. So even though this is from 2018, but right now there is a lot of shortages. I don't have the updated number, but I'm sure it's every single company, small or big, have been looking for analytics folks. And that being said, so one thing I want to do, before we jump into too much detail, is give you guys at least a couple of pieces of information that you can take away, no matter what you do later on in the field of analytics. Um, and overall, as we discussed, you'll get a pretty good idea about the overall field, and then you can see where your organization fits, or you fit, or your interest might be. Um, and just to have a structure in that process, so what I'm using here is a very popular analytics maturity model by company named Gartner. So they're a research company. They are responsible for a
And
lot of the,
Anwar,
yeah,
Anwar, sorry to interject.
yeah, go ahead.
I think some of them may have the wrong link and they're getting on the wrong thing. I'm not sure how that happened. I'm just sending them the right one. So if you could just pause for just a second.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to give a couple of minutes because I'm not
Yeah, for some
surprised.
reason they're
So,
all on the full stack link. I have no idea how they got into that.
I'm
So
kind of
let's
familiar with that problem. So what usually happens, I've seen, is in the class we experience that. Like if I send the links way ahead of time, then
yeah.
people kind of get confused like which one to use. So usually that's why I've been sending like at the last minute. In this case, I'm guessing they got both links. So
Yeah,
No,
looks like
this happened.
yeah.
This happened with me as well. Where I was trying to sign up for this webinar, and it wouldn't let me. Like it just for without me doing anything, it just signed me up for the full stack webinar as well.
Mm.
And I was really surprised. Like, why did that happen? Because I did not choose that option. So you might see my name in that webinar sign up list as well. So there's some problem in the sign up. That form,
that's
online
the
form
wrong
that you have.
one. I'm not sure.
just so that we don't have an awkward silence. So you guys are staying safe in this COVID-19 situation?
Yes, it's kind of camping in the house.
True.
There, working from home.
Yeah, the world will never be same, what just happened this year.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like I'm really curious to see how the life after this will be, because
True.
this is some experience that is like none of like the world never had it.
Yep.
So
In no war situation, in nothing like this kind of
I know.
widespread.
Yeah. So
I heard like I haven't seen the video, but Bill Gates in 2015 in one of the speech, I heard he mentioned that next big problem is not going to be really from like war or anything like that. It's going to be from really tiny
from a pandemic.
virus. Yeah.
Yes, I read that article somewhere as well.
Pretty scary. Like how the series he mentioned, like this virus might be with us for a while. We're not going to get out of it soon. So.
Yeah, I really feel bad for all the victims that yeah, people who died and the struggling.
There's that.
And the worst part is about the people uh, who are on daily wages. Like this is as much as this lockdown is important to control that virus, but it's really hard on the people who have an hourly job.
Yeah, that's true. And they are true superheroes at this point, like people who are like grocery worker and folks like that.
Okay, I think I have
that-
most of the people
Yeah, most
come
of them.
over here, so
Okay.
you can get started again. Sorry about that.
No problem, no problem. Yeah.
Teams is weird that way. I think some people got on the full stack and some got on the data analytics, so we just got.
All right, so everybody here. So I already introduced myself. Not going back, but let's start from here. So we're talking about, as for the overall agenda, we're going to be going through many different aspects of analytics field. Hopefully that should answer a lot of the high level curiosity you guys have in different parts of analytics. So one of the part that I always say, like, please take this away with you no matter what you do, whatever you decide, is the maturity model of analytics. And this is by Gartner Research. So how they divide the entire analytics maturity is into 4 different phases. So the first one is descriptive analytics, which really deals with what happened. And again, we'll talk about more details about each of the phases in later down the slide, but at high level, it really worries about what happened in the past. The next, it gets into diagnostic analytics, where it's why did it happen. Next is predictive. It's talking about future, what will likely happen. And the last one, prescriptive, is how can we make it happen. Now, it's of course looks very simple. Now, if you guys are wondering, like, why this kind of terms, right? Like diagnostic, prescriptive, sounds kind of odd. So think from a medical perspective. So when you go to a doctor, what happens, right? Let's say I went to doctor. I would be describing whatever problem I had. Most likely, I'm going to say like, well, I was having headache last night, and this and that problem. So I'm really describing what happened in the past for doctors to really look into that and do something about it, right? So that's the descriptive analytics when you're describing your problem to doctor. And the diagnostic. So once I describe my problem, the doctor most likely would figure out like, well, maybe you have this specific disease or whatever problems, right? So that's where the diagnostic happens. Why did it happen? So in the business world, basically you're looking at your report and then you're figuring out why certain things went bad, right? Maybe you didn't have as much sales. Well, because of all this maybe COVID-19 scenario, you had all this loss of sales. So that would be a diagnostic, finding the root cause. The next phase where company gets more matured is you're wondering about what will likely happen. Now you see here this part added separately. The reason being nobody can really say what will happen. I'm sure a lot of the folks, last year never expected that this could happen in the world, right? So we never really say what will happen. We always would say what will likely happen, because as we analyze data, we can only say given all this data currently I have access to, there is 80% chance of something like this happening, right? That's how we describe things. But again, it deals with, this field deals with, this phase deals with more of what will likely happen in the future. So an example could be, let's say, if you, let's say you have a retail store and tomorrow how many people you might be expecting, right? So that kind of would be the prediction. In doctor's analogy, it would be, doctor might say like, well, you have this disease, and given you have this disease, you might be expecting, these other things happening over the next 2 weeks or so, right? And when doctor describes that, what do? You say like, doctor, I don't want those problem that you're saying that's going to happen. Help me out. I want to take some medication so that those problems don't happen, and I would actually be in good shape, right? So I want to control how I feel tomorrow and the day after. So that's where they give a prescription, and you basically sort of like control your future, how you're going to feel about it, right? So in the analytics world, so there are some techniques where instead of relying on whatever is going on and going with the flow, you literally apply that to optimize your scenario, right? So if you think about Amazon, right? So if they had all this warehouse and status quo as it is, if they don't do anything about it, well, their supply chain is gonna go through certain scenario. But they didn't want that, right? They wanted to control all of that. They wanted to make it better, right? It could be 2 hours, 1 hour, whatever, right? So that's where they run a lot of the optimization techniques to control the future, what they want to happen. So that's really the 4 phases. Now, if you think about in organization, even large companies like Microsoft or Amazon, it's not like every department is all they have to hear. Actually, most of the companies is unfortunately right here in the descriptive phase. And some of them in some specific department might be advancing to some other area like here, a little bit of use, and the very, very few companies, of course, it's increasing day by day, but very few companies are really using the optimization. So those are the 4 phases. Now, if you think about in terms of kind of information we get, so from the descriptive phase, it's really hindsight, right? We are looking back, looking in the past and figuring out. In the diagnostic area, you are learning about what insight you can get, right? So you look at the data, you see something and you have some explanation. So that's your insight. In the predictive and prescriptive area, that's where you have more foresight, right? You know what will likely happen, or you're doing something about it so that you can control what might happen. So that's your foresight. And of course, as you progress further up, it's going to be more difficult to implement in terms of resource and right. But value-wise, of course, it's same way. It's going to be much higher. So that's the maturity model. If you learn one thing from today, I want to make sure that you get that in your head, and it's going to be super helpful. Anywhere you go, talk to anybody about analytics, you can use this as your framework for that conversation, right? Even if you go in an interview and talk about analytics, if you ask this question in terms of this framework, it's going to be like much more impressive. All right. So that being said, I'm going to just give you a couple of examples. As I mentioned, right, in the descriptive, we are really looking at what happened, right? Some of the example would be, well, if you have a retail store, you might wonder about what's my total stock in the inventory, right? Or per customer, how much spent is there? Or you might wonder about year-over-year change in the sales. So here is an example in a pretty typical dashboard example for a retail store, where you have maybe some online sales, store sales, and I'm sure you guys, all of you have seen reports like that, right? You have some trend over time, you have some breakdown by the different regions, in a map or bar charts, you might have some pie charts and so on, right? And all of these really looking in the past and just portraying in a more consumable fashion, right? Because think about it, all these reports were done based on lot of records. And if I give you entire sales transaction data, as a human, you cannot really consume that in a meaningful way, right? As a human, we need a little more summarized version of that to consume. That's why what we do is descriptive phase from all this transactional data, millions of rows and whatnot. We bring it up, aggregate all of that, and sort of like put in nice visualization to be able to consume and make decision. So that's the descriptive really. Now here's what happens through the maturity. As you provide more of those reports that I was showing, management and all the folks in the company, they're gonna start asking you a lot of questions, right? Just like as you describe your problem to doctors, like I had this headache, you're gonna ask doctor next, like, hey, why is I'm having headache? Can you please explain? Same way, as you provide more and more reports to the organization, everybody is gonna be asking, why am I seeing this? Why is this going down? Why is that going up? Right? Why is it cost going up? Why is it sales going down? They're gonna ask all of that question. Okay, so in this just natural progression that people will ask you this why question, and then you'll wonder about like, well, I just don't need to give the report. Now I need to find out the root cause. And typically what happens, you in this phase, you basically get into a lot more slicing, dicing, filtering, and get into specific drilling things down, finding the root cause. So it could be that, let's say if sales went down, okay, I mean, maybe, drilling through all the reports, you find out like, well, there was an issue that salespeople left, and you find out why they left. Maybe there was a competitor company, they offered a lot more money to the sales folks and they just left. Or maybe they are just unhappy with the management or whatever, right? So that's your root cause. There could be that you're finding that there is low customer satisfaction rate, right? And your management is asking, why am I having low customer satisfaction rate? So in this phase, this is where you drill down and figure out like, well, maybe last quarter, all the products we had, those are having a lot of defects, right? So customers didn't really like that. They didn't appreciate all the defective products. That could be reason, right? Or it could be that, sales is declining. It doesn't have to be retail sales. It could be anything. It could be, think about, it could be even online tools like Facebook and whatnot. Maybe they're seeing like less adoption. It could be that people are moving from, that tool, or certain age group might be moving from that tool or product to a different brand or product, right? Maybe they're moving to Snapchat or Instagram or, TikTok or whatever have you. Right, so these are basically root cause finding step. That would be your diagnostic step. And the thing is, unless you are at this phase, all these reports you have in the descriptive doesn't do as good, right? Like if you're just looking at, you had your aggregated sale, so 1 billion, right? It's good to know, but it doesn't really do any, it doesn't really give you any action items. In the diagnostic phase, this is where you solve your problem, right? So now, as an analyst or just like doctor, you look at all of that and find out like, well, this is the root cause. You surface that to management, and they can take specific actions based on that. So this is highly valuable maturity phase. So here is just an example of in this phase, to my example, right? Looks like this product group, they might have moved to a different, in this age group might have moved to a different product. Now, in the predictive analytics phase, as I mentioned earlier, this is where you try to predict the future, right? And we don't ever say like this is going to happen, right? As I mentioned, we always say there is whatever percent of chance that this might happen. So we always usually have a percentage attached to that. And that would be like likelihood of some event happening, right? So let's say if you think about, I'm sure everybody has credit card and loans and whatnot. So when you take a credit card from an organization, right? What happens? They go through all your credit file, your application data, and they try to figure out what is the likelihood that you might actually pay back on time. Okay, and there are plenty of examples of predictive. So if you open up your weather app on your phone, for example, or weather.com, you see, like, there's usually by day it would say 80% chance of rain or 50% chance of rain, etc. Right? So all of those are really predictive analytics. Or as I also mentioned earlier, like in the retail store or banks, a lot of times they try to figure out how many employees or workforce wise, how many employees they would need to be present to serve the customer, right? The same way with any of the online store as well. Let's say during the specific events like Thanksgiving or Black Friday or Christmas time, right? They might see some surge. So they will have to be ready with resource-wise, right? Their own capacity-wise. So that's why they also do some predictive analytics and figure out how much of demand they might have, so they would be ready with the supply. So there are a wide variety of things you can think of in the predictive. Also in the healthcare industry, for example, it could be what is the likelihood that somebody has let's say a specific disease. Could be diabetes, or could be heart issues, or it could be even COVID-19 or anything like that. So in every single industry, you will see there are a lot of interesting use, be it finance, be it retail or healthcare or telecom or whatnot. Everywhere there are plenty of use of this predictive. And obviously it's highly valuable because once you know what might be happening in future, you can actually do something about it, right? If future is not in your favor, maybe you can take corrective actions and try to influence that. So that's the predictive analytics part. So here is a story, a little bit old story, but a story from Target. So a few years back, there was one dad who got a mail, postal mail, where it basically it was addressed to his daughter, and it had some messaging basically indicating that if she's interested in buying some pregnancy related items from the store or items for kids and whatnot. So the dad got really upset, like why are they sending this to my I don't know, 13 or 14, 15 years old daughter. So he got very upset and he called Target, local Target manager, right? And as you can imagine, local Target manager has absolutely no idea what mail he got, where it came from, and why you might have received that, right? So then he apologized and said, like, let me look into that and I will get back to you. And guess what happens a couple of days later? The dad actually calls back the manager and apologizes and says, something was happening at my home that I was not even aware of. So basically, his daughter was really pregnant. So apparently, Target actually had a predictive model built out from a lot of the sales data. They would be able to figure out even like what is the phase of the pregnancy, which trimester somebody is, based on all of the purchase patterns and whatnot. So as you can imagine, where sometimes it gets, of course, in a questionable area, right? This could be in one of those where somebody else knows about you so much that in your home even people don't know about it, right? So there are good example or great example, and there are also negative example. There are a lot of companies, of course, using it for great reasons, and some of them not using it for the right purpose. So you guys might know about all of this Cambridge Analytica event that happened, right? You guys also might know about face detection technology that is used for good things and also same time used for bad things as well, right? So it's not technology's fault, of course, but I'm just trying to make sure that you understand some of this technique, while extremely powerful, are unfortunately also sometimes used for wrong purpose. Here is another example of predictive analytics. So back in 2008, actually, where there was a guy, Nate Silver. So I think he just made 2 mistakes, but otherwise all electoral college he predicted perfectly. And then in 2012, he predicted every single one accurately, like who is going to win. Is Obama is going to win or the Republican going to win? So he got so much attention after his 2012 prediction, right? All eyes on him for 2016, and his company got acquired by another, large corporation. But then later on, 2016, everybody was really looking at him like, what's going to be the prediction. But as you can see, at some point, he had 71.4% for Hillary Clinton and then only 28.6 for Donald Trump. And you know what happens later, right? So we have to be careful. Some of this model is also time sensitive, right? Things change day by day. That's one factor, time, but also there are other external factors as well, right? Maybe you don't have all the data that you should have, right? So remember, always the model you're building is really based on what you have. And that's why I was saying earlier, like, we never say like this is going to happen with this accuracy. It's more of, given the data we have at hand at this point in time, this is what we think will likely happen. And a couple of more examples about credit card. So as I said, based on your credit files and your income and whatnot, people build plenty of models. For example, whether you should receive a spam or junk mail or not, or whether you should be given a credit card or not, or how much, if you get a credit card, how much of credit you should have. So yeah, I used to build actually a lot of this model way back. So apart from credit file data or whatever you put in your application, there are also other data that being used in those kind of stuff. For example, demographic data. So if a company is sending to a specific area, they would look at the demographic of that area as well. There is also cluster data. If you're curious about cluster data, so there are some companies that they divide the entire country into like 63 different clusters. So, and based on that, they can tell a lot of the characteristics of people in there, like whether they have, cul-de-sac and kids, and what kind of TV show they might be watching. So much information you can kind of infer from some of these clusters. And other companies like financial institution, they might be buying that to figure out how they can leverage that, or retail store, or TV shows or studios might be buying that to figure out what they should be doing next. So there is this other thing of data sharing or data bartering. So a lot of the companies, unfortunately, is like gathering data from web, and they are actually packaging that up and selling to other companies, right? So that way, we actually a data product. If you think about it, every activity that you do online creates a lot of data trail, and companies are using that to create your own profile. Next, prescriptive analytics. So as I mentioned, like not a whole lot of companies, using that yet. This is very, very powerful. But some of the use cases you can think of, drilling for oil. So if you have, let's say, limited budget, right? Let's say you have $10 million and you want to figure out, you have multiple sites. Let's say you have 10 different sites and you want to figure out which sites to drill. And of course, each of the site might have a specific percent of chance, like what's the chance of finding oil there. So what you do then, you try to optimize your budget, like which one you should be investing money on so that you have the best outcome. Same thing happens with developing drugs. So if you think about all these drug companies, again, they can solve a lot of the drug problem, right, if they want to. It's not necessarily a technology problem always. A lot of times it really comes down to economic problem, right? So they have limited budget and they will have to think about, or they think about maximizing their profit, right? So in that way, what drug they should allocate how much money on research so that they can get the most financial value. So that's how some of those decisions are really made. Then distribution problem is another cool one. It's highly used a lot of times, both distribution and routing problem. And I'll show a couple of examples in a moment here. Let's actually talk through some of that. So airline overbooking is a fun one. I'm sure you guys know that here. When I'm sure you have seen, like, at the airport, or let's say you are in plane, already got in the plane, and then you heard this announcement, right? Hey, we are looking for somebody. We have overbooking, and we are looking for somebody who would, cancel their flight, and then they'll just give you some good amount of incentive, right? Maybe on your $200 ticket, they might be offering, let's say, $800 or something, right? And then you might wonder, like, how in the world they overbooked, right? There is very specific number of seats in the plane, and it doesn't vary, right? From today to tomorrow, it's the same exact number of plane seats. And how in the world comes like they overbooked, right? It's not done manually. There is no way of making mistake. How did that happen? The reason is airlines intentionally overbooks it. What they figured out is usually somebody is not going to fly. There are a few folks who will, for various reasons, are not going to fly. Okay, they are going to be a no-show. Now, if they're going to be no-show, instead of having that empty seats in the plane, what they figured out, like, well, I could overbook it, sell the same seat to somebody else, and then make some extra money. So that's what they have been doing all along. And unfortunately, sometimes their model might not be accurate, right? Sometimes some people do show up more than what they predicted. And as a result, now they have to figure out who to, cancel the flight. So that's what happens in the airline overbooking. But it's very, very profitable for airlines if you think about it, right? If they can leverage like 10% extra booking, that makes a lot of money for them. And what prescriptive analytics do is it finds the sweet spot. It figures out, like, well, if this many show up, how much money I have to spend if I overbook by, let's say, 20%. And if somebody shows up, what might be the cost of getting them off board, right? How much incentive I'll have to give versus how much I'll be missing in terms of money. So based on all of that, they find the sweetest spot and decide accordingly. So that's one good example of prescriptive analytics. Another one, this is a very simplistic look, but you can think of this way. So let's say you have factory where you're building things, and then you have different warehouse where you're taking this product, and from the warehouse, let's say you're taking to different distribution centers. Okay, so when you do that, if you think about a business like Amazon or Walmart or large ones, right? They need to think about where to locate this warehouse and all this distribution center so that whenever they need product, they can get it the fastest. And also transportation wise, it is the least amount of cost plus storage wise, it least cost. So there it gets very, very complicated. But in a simple scenario, all I'm trying to say here is if you have a scenario like that, and if you can find out the cost in all these different aspects, the optimization technique, what it does, it takes all the input and figures out how much you should produce in which factory, how much you should store in a warehouse, and how much you should, store in what distribution center. And this has become very, very vital for some of these companies like Amazon. They are the rock star in this area. Another industry example, this would be for more appropriate for Boeing or companies who have very, very large machines, could be for car manufacturers or things like that, where if you are making a very expensive machine, if you have a large factory and you're producing things, right? If your factory breaks down, it's not only the repair cost that is your issue here. Because of the breakdown, you will have productivity issue, right? You're going to have less production, and which might lead to not meeting customer demand and fine from the customers. So basically, all I'm trying to say is, if your machine truly breaks down, it has a lot of expense associated with that. But if you can prevent that, so let's say if you can figure out, like usually it breaks down at this point in time, and if you do predictive maintenance, before the breakdown happens, you can avoid a lot of that. And some of these companies, as I said, car manufacturer or plane manufacturer, they have been working on this kind of technique now. They're using this. So that's your predictive, prescriptive maintenance. All right. So that being said, so hopefully kind of that gives you different aspects of, different maturity and the kind of problems that usually solved using those techniques. Now let's think about in terms of skill set. For somebody to be a data scientist, what kind of combination is usually ideal, right? And again, there is wide variation. It's not necessarily mandatory that you'll have to be expert in all the three fields, but it would be, I would say, a perfect scenario, right? We don't always have perfect scenario. So in the data science, what you need is some knowledge of mathematics, right? And then some knowledge of computer science and some domain expertise, right? So if you think about it, do you have to be a full-fledged computer scientist? Not necessarily, because computer science is a very, very large field. It deals with so many kinds of different problems, right? You don't need to know necessarily all aspects of it, but certain aspects that's used, let's say more around the machine learning side or data processing side, those become a lot more relevant in this case. From mathematics, there is again a lot of branch of mathematics. Do you need to really learn everything? Not really. Again, there are some statistical and techniques within mathematics branch that becomes more relevant here, right? As for the domain expertise, that's really on you. Everybody is different, right? Some might have healthcare background, some might have product management background in different industries, some might have telecom background. So whatever your domain expertise is, you know your problem best. Given the 4 phases that I explained, hopefully that gives you idea like, well, in my industry, in my business domain, I could relate to this problem in that phase, right? Maybe I could apply that technique. So that's where your own expertise, domain expertise comes into picture. And these are just tooling and knowledge that helps you build some of that. So that's the Venn diagram. And then this one, I'm going to talk briefly about any analytics project you ever do. Ideally, you think about a life cycle that it goes through. It's not just a random somebody trying to analyze some data and be done with it. Usually, before we take on an analytics project, we do first step of what is the problem we are trying to solve here? Is it even worth solving, right? So that's our very first interest. Then we prepare some data, we explore the data. Then after exploration, we figure out like, what, I need to do this additional calculation, or I need to keep only this part of the data. So that's the transform and select. After that, we build a model and we hope it's going to perform better, but to make sure we also validate that. After we validate, we're happy, then we deploy that model so that on daily basis it can do something. So a good example would be, let's say, if it is your credit card model, it would be once it is deployed, it means it can be really applied on other people that it was not trained on. And once it is in action, then we continually monitor that. That means we, over the months and years, we monitor like, is it performing pretty good or is the performance going down, right? A lot of times because of socioeconomic factors, we have to change some of that, adjust some of that. So when that happens, we realize like, well, it worked for 2 years fairly well. Now it's time to redo that. So we actually go back in the cycle and do the whole thing again. So that's sort of project life cycle in analytics. I'm sure a lot of you also have questions about kind of jobs, analytics professional are in. So this is a pretty nice picture for you to think about. So if you think about those 3 pieces that are showing in the Venn diagram, so it kind of, kind of matching of that. And there are 3 areas you see here, right? So when you think about an analyst job, they come in all shapes and sizes with all types of title. Okay, so from the domain knowledge perspective, more from the business focus, you might have people who are just doing, financial analysis, or could be like HR or people analysis. It could be marketing campaign analysis and so on, right? People who are more on the, let's say, SQL expert and things like that, their title might be database analyst, data analyst, SQL analyst, CRM analyst, and so on. People who have more statistical knowledge, you might find them in, again, many different ways. Some who learned, like, this is another tool called SAS, statistical analysis system. So they could be just called SAS programmer, for example, or statistical analyst, or fraud or risk analyst. So as you can see, or could be modeler or statistician, right? So there are all sorts of job titles. And then when you think about all three coming together, so you have some business domain knowledge of what's going on, you have some technical knowledge, and then also some stat knowledge as well. That's where data scientist kind of sits on the sweet spot in that corner. So this gives you like job from many different angles, and depending on your background and your interest and skill set, you can kind of try to fit yourself where you belong, or what kind of job you might be looking for. So hope that helps. So now that we sort of like talked about overview of analytics field, I'm going to talk about analytics courses offered by Skillspire. So there are two courses offered. One is the Introduction to Analytics, another is Advanced Analytics. So in the introduction area, and I have a link here, and if you go to the website, it's fairly easy to find under courses. So in the introductory one, we have basically three different sections you can think of. And what we do there is, in the first part, we really teach people Excel as much as we can. And then we get into SQL, which is a widely used, very popular tool to extract data or summarize data. So we, starting from basic to intermediate to advanced SQL, we go through all of that. In the third part, we focus more on the Power BI tool. But again, if you learn one tool like that, it's very easy to really transition to a different tool. So if you know Power BI, for you to switch to Tableau or vice versa should be fairly easy because a lot of the concepts are very similar. So in this phase, we really think about like, well, if I just had one of this visualization tool, right, what can I do? As part of that, one of the area we cover is best practices within data visualization. What are the things you need to keep in mind as you draw different charts and graphs and whatnot? So we go through the best practices and provide a lot of guidance there. We learn about data transformation. We also learn about how to relate different data entities together. And then we learn about, creating reports, publishing report, how to share with other people, and so on, and how to create dashboards, etc. I'll give you a simple example as an outcome of this course also. So let me just quickly show you. Well, let's one second. Where is it? There you go. So here's an example, if you guys can still see. Sample kind of dashboard, for example, right? Like where you are, for a retail store, you're comparing different metrics and, from the past and present, you're showing the breakdown and so on. You're learning about how to put those numbers in a calendar view so that it looks really good and easy to see, by week, day breakdown of things. You learn about how to add different filters and, draw different kinds of charts and whatnot. And this is one really powerful technique folks learn in that Power BI section is how to create heat map. This is actually pretty amazing what you can do with that. So this example is more around if you have a, let's say, retail store or floor plan. Within the floor plan, here I'm showing like how to color them with different color coding based on the performance of that specific section of the retail store. So if you think about, let's say you're not retail store, something else. Let's say you manage, something else like a facility where you have you have to worry about temperature and humidity, you can easily change this to that kind of data as well, right? You can show in a heat map. If you have, let's say, an event, in the event, let's say you want to know where are people kind of upset, where are people who are kind of happy, you can kind of figure that out or portray something like that in this kind of heat map. So just giving you some example of what kind of techniques you learn and what you are able to do with that. And here are a few more examples of kind of visualization that you get to learn. Okay, so that's introduction course. And then next one is the advanced analytics course. So this one is focused more on the, so the previous one was more focused on like junior data analyst role, and this is more focused on the data science career. So as for the topics covered here, we talk about hands-on Python, and so the people actually couple of sessions they spend time on learning Python. Then we spend time on exploratory data analysis. Then we do data visualization using Python. And then we learn about some of the things we were discussing earlier, predictive modeling. We learn about customer segmentation and whatever segmentation have you. We learn about time series forecasting, and we learn about some basic optimization and also recommendation technique. And some of these topics, of course, how deep it goes, it depends on the cohort that we have at that point. So we usually adjust based on people's background and what can be covered throughout that. Again, here is the link to that course detail, and also the course outline. I'm sure you have seen on the website, so just I put it for reference here. It goes into a little more detail. So we have at this point 6 minutes left. I can open up the forum for questions if you want, or if you want me to go into details of any of these course outline, I'm happy to do that. So I'm just gonna give time for your feedback. Like, do you want to ask question, or do you want me to go through some of these in more detail? Let's sort of open up the forum.
Since we only have 6 minutes left, can you give us some information about like the schedule, when the courses happen, things like that?
Good question. Yasmin, are you on the line?
Yeah, those details are on the website. So if you choose, introductory course or analytics, and if you go onto the tab where it says tuition and dates, you should be able to see the dates listed.
Yep.
So the introductory, the level 1 course is a 6-week program or a 12-week program?
It's a 12-week course, meeting once a week.
Okay.
So I think I see your confusion, Yasmin. So I think in the website it might have mentioned 6 weeks. However, in the previous one, yes, I'm going to clarify. So in the previous cohort, we had the instructor actually, I believe, was doing 2 3-hour classes per week. So it was finished in 6 weeks, but it's really 12 weeks, 12 sessions, you can say, 3 hours per session. So total 36 hours.
Okay, yes, makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
So, Anwar, if you were to look at the way we've broken up the course and go to the Gartner model, so the introductory course, where do we, what are the topics that we're covering in the
Excellent.
Gartner model?
That is an excellent question. Thank you. So introductory course focuses heavily there on the descriptive analytics, right? So if you think about organization overall, I would say like 95% or more are still like, you still need that part, right? So you get expert on the descriptive, and then you learn also like how to start, touching on the diagnostic part as well as you are drawing these things. So, mostly in the descriptive phase with some diagnostic knowledge there. It does not go into predictive or prescriptive. That would be in the advanced one.
Okay, so Tainika is asking, is the introductory course a prerequisite for the advanced?
I would definitely highly recommend, because in our past experience, we've been doing this for several years by now, And without this one, when people jump into the advanced, the problem is they don't, a lot of times they don't have the foundational knowledge. So unless you're already an expert in a lot of these things I'm talking about, it's just not a very good experience. And as an analyst, like even when you become a data scientist, remember, like when you work in an organization, these are the skill set you still need to have. So I would absolutely highly recommend that you do that unless you already know about this.
Okay. And so when the classes start, is there like, are there going to be any tests or something like checkpoints where you could just see if everybody, like if we're doing okay, like
Yeah,
are
that's a good question. Yeah, so what we do actually, there's one, I don't know if I have super detailed, but basically, so a couple of things here. So overall, maybe I'll just touch up that area, like how does the class look like. So it's usually 50% of story time or lecture time, and then 50% of demo exercise hands-on. Of course, it can vary. It's just sort of like estimate. And then, so within the class, of course, you also get to do hands-on exercise, right?
Okay.
And also after the session is done, then what typically happens, you get a homework in a day or two. So I used to teach on Thursday. So you typically, Friday night I'd be posting, homework for you, and then you'd be working on that and submit that a couple of days ahead of the next class, so that the instructor has time to evaluate that.
Right. Okay.
So that's how usually it happens. And toward the end, you'd be typically working on a larger, bigger size project.
Okay.
Other questions?
So I see a question here. Is there a minimum number of students that have to sign up for you to have the class? Yes, we do try to keep the class sizes small. I think Anwar likes it that way. In terms of interaction and the amount of work that's being that comes up with the course. That said, it's anywhere between 5 to 10 students.
Okay.
And is the meeting on campus or virtual? With the way things are, we are planning for a virtual class. If things change in the next month, we would quickly move it to a hybrid, because there are people who have taken it from distance. So we do both hybrid and in person. I mean, virtual and in person.
Okay.
And the in-person portion is in Seattle?
Yeah, this is in Bellevue.
One more question.
Yeah.
So I believe we are going to get a certificate of completion by the at the end of the program.
Yes.
Correct.
So is this accredited? Like if we present it and like we go for a job and present it, like is it known or accredited? Like is it going to get value? That okay, because if you do a certain kind of program from a bigger university, like okay, I have done this program from this university, that is it's a known place, right? So how much weightage will this certificate be given when we are looking for a job?
I'll answer the first part. So we are
Yeah, I mean,
approved. We are approved by the Washington Training Board. So when we give the certificate, it's it is an approved curriculum. And
okay.
regarding the curriculum and stuff, I'll let Anwar answer that.
Yeah. So I get this question a lot. So one of the aspects I always tell students is your best thing for success is really comes from as you do all this homework and like toward the later you get the project. So I would say like your outcome throughout the project, like throughout the courses, including your last project that you do, that would be your best thing to take to job interview. Because if you think about in this country, right, like overall, we don't, like I interview a lot of people, we usually don't ask, even if they come from even like very large school or something like that. We're not
Okay.
really looking at the certificate. What I usually end up asking is what projects you have done, right? If there's an interesting project, that's where we try to hone in a lot more detail, because that's where you can actually dig in and understand the person.
Yes.
So I would always recommend that, that should be really something to take to the job. And otherwise, if you think about it, like a lot of people would be just getting a certificate for the certificate's sake. Yeah. So.
Right. No, I understand. Like what kind of skills do you demonstrate at your job interview is going to be the most important factor. Yes.
Yep. So what I also recommend is a couple of things, right? One is the kind of things that you have done through the courses or on your own or on the projects. Plus, along the course, you also learn about like what are the capability that you have gotten so far, right? So in the data world, there are different capability that you achieve, right? There's one about data acquisition, right? So you're able to acquire data from many different sources, data transformation, where you can shape the data whatever way you want. And data visualization, where you can prepare data in whatever, like in reports and dashboard. You see like all this different capability when you talk in terms of that, right? Like these are the things I can do. Then people can, like interviewer can relate very well. Like, oh, okay, so these are the things I can expect out of you.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
So there's a question about job placement after the course. What types of jobs have you placed your students in the following program? That's a great question. Towards the end of the last year and going forward in 2020, we have been placing a lot of emphasis on trying to get our alumni into jobs. To that effect, Terry, who is on the call, has been working, relentlessly reaching out to companies, and we've been making some great partnerships where we can try to place our students. There is no guarantees, but we become your ally in helping you create your resume, mentoring you through the job search program. And also, if we do hear from the instructor that you are an excellent candidate that is ready to be placed in the job market, then we share your resume with companies.
Sure.
Oh, so we've been we started back in 2016 and started offering courses from 2017. So some of the other courses that we offer are full stack web development, Java and cloud computing, and data analytics. So we've graduated close to 135 plus students so far.
Wow. That's a good amount.
And do you have any information on those students who have graduated from the program on what types of jobs they've been able to secure or the success that they've had after going through your program?
Yeah, I think Anwar can talk to this. Yulia was we had an alumni who after the introductory course, I think she came back and she taught in class. In fact, she came back as a TA for about a couple of months, and then she joined a company and she joined as a junior data analyst, and she's gainfully employed and doing really well. I mean, there are several cases like that, but then she's the only one that comes to my mind right at this point.
There are also others like where usually folks who have gone through the courses, there are interesting stories where I've seen. So after going through the course, somebody got super excited about the field itself and thought, like, well, maybe I'll just do a master's now because it was so interesting. And once she got into the other course, she was trying to send somebody back to this course, like, hey, you need to do this course first because there are a lot of amazing things that you learn from there. So there are all kinds of interesting stories, of course. Any other question?
Oh, yeah, even after the advanced course, we had someone join Microsoft through a vendor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had several cases like that.
Okay.
Any other question?
No, that's all from my side. If I have any other questions, I think I'll email you guys, Yasmin or you.
Sure.
And
Any
All
other
right.
questions from anybody else? Okay, well, then we'll call it a wrap. Thank you very much. And sorry about the confusion about the two links initially. I'm not sure how people got into that link, but regardless, I think we had everybody here. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out by email or by phone.
okay,
Thank you, Anwar.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye bye.
Stay safe. Bye.